talking about the Oilers for a second.
Okay.
Let's get into it a little bit. And I mean, I love Oilers fans because they come at us hard.
It's the best.
And man, oh man, I feel the wrath of Oilers fans, especially through this podcast on TikTok. I'm called like the anti-Oilers guy. Like it's just Oilers fans just have it out for me, man. Like I was actually like legitimately scared watching the game at Rogers Place. I'm like, some Oilers fan is just gonna come and jump on me from behind or something like that, based on the things I've said about this team over the last couple of years. But Lepore, man, you just look at what's happened when McDavid and Draisaitl aren't at their best, when they are held off the score sheet, when those top guys are not producing. It is tough sledding for this team because after losing to the Toronto Maple Leafs, that was their 6th loss in a row.
Yeah, alarms were going off.
They have since won back-to-back games against Columbus and Seattle, but this is a team that started the season red hot. They were leading the Pacific Division for I don't know how many days it was, but they were the number 1 team in the Pacific Division for a pretty long stretch to start the season. Mm-hmm. And now looking at the Pacific Division, Vegas is in first place. And how about we base this on points percentage? Because teams have played a different amount of games. So Vegas is number 1, Calgary's number 2, Anaheim is number 3, and the Oilers are now 4th in points percentage in the Pacific Division.
Wow.
So what's your take on this team right now? Like, has anything changed from last season with this Oilers team, or is it more of the same of what we saw? It's Draisaitl and McDavid putting the team on their backs, and when those guys aren't at their best, these are the things you're going to see from Edmonton.
Yeah. I'm not like the Oilers will always have a soft spot for me because I grew up being the biggest Gretzky fan in the world. But I don't believe in Edmonton. I'll put it that way. I love McDavid. I love Draisaitl, but I just look at the lineup and I don't consider them a legitimate contender. I think they're a very good team. And they're going to win a lot of games. But when you're talking about that upper echelon group of teams that I really and truly think have a chance to win the Stanley Cup, I don't put them there. And I'll tell you why. It's because I think when it's easy to identify why a team won't win or what you have to do to stop a team, to me, that's like the alarm bell going off of like, yeah, things aren't good. Like to the point about like McDavid and Draisaitl, like easier said than done. But it's not even about like keeping them off the score sheet. Just as long as they don't go bananas, it's like, you're probably going to beat them over a 7-game series.
Yeah, like hold them to like 1 or 2 point nights.
That's it.
And not like a 3 or a 4 point night.
Exactly. So there's that aspect of it. And there's also the aspect of the playoffs, the old saying, it's like they're a marathon, they're not a sprint. Could those two guys keep up a bananas pace over 4 rounds against good teams? No, it's like they're human. Like I talked about Matthews being a league goal scorer. Well, yeah, stretches where he goes 5 games without a goal, 4 games without a goal, 1 goal in 4 games, 1 goal in 5 games. So like, I just think at some point that would happen and they would hit a wall and lose. But yeah, like I said, it's the 2 factors. It's them having like an incredible unlikeliness to have that kind of consistency over a 4-round span, as well as it's just too easily identifiable as a thing to stop. And like to elaborate on what I mean by that, like you quite often hear when teams talk about a certain team that has like an elite goalie, and they'll say, well, if so-and-so stands on his head, this team can make a run. It's like, okay, so if he doesn't, that one thing, like if he doesn't, would we even be talking about this? And that's how I feel about the Oilers. If McDavid and Draisaitl are just not super bananas elite 2-3 points a game, would we even be talking about this? No. And they are bananas players, but I just don't think it's possible for them to do that and for the team to pull that off over 3 or 4 rounds. I really don't.
I completely agree with you. At some point, these guys are human, and it's insane because you look at the numbers and they still have, both of them, 49 points in 29 games this year, which is absolutely absurd. Mm-hmm. But you're seeing them go through a stretch right now where The points aren't piling up. The goals aren't going in at the same rate that they were at the start of the season. Even their power play, Lepore. We did a podcast, I want to say it was about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago. The Oilers power play was operating at 50%.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
50%. Like, that is insane.
It's impossible.
It's now down to around 30. Actually, funny enough, the Oilers and Leafs are now 1-2 in the NHL in power play percentage. Both of them a little bit over 30%. But when things start to regress to the mean like that, and when guys like Zach Hyman, who again, he was off to a really good start, he has slowed down. He has now 11 goals and 19 points in 26 games, which is really nice.
Yeah.
But remember, at the start of the season, he was a point a game guy. Everyone's like, Hyman, oh my God, he might get 75, 80 points this season. He's going to score over 40 goals playing with Connor McDavid. I don't think that's the case anymore. And sure, could Zach Hyman hit 30 this year? Absolutely, he can, especially when he's going to play with those two guys and get power play exposure to them. And then another guy I look at is even Darnell Nurse. Last season, career year, 16 goals in 56 games. He has 1 goal in 23 games this season.
Oof.
Darnell Nurse.
Oof.
So, you know, I go up and down this lineup. After you get past McDavid and Draisaitl, and listen, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 25 points in 28 games. He's been great, especially on the power play.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a drop off after that. And I will say, I will admit, Jesse Puljujarvi is having a nice season.
Yeah, it's good for him to see him do well.
He's actually been playing well this year, but I still think the same issues exist where there's not a lot of depth up front. Defensively, this team is not good. Goaltending wise, this team is also not very good.
Question marks. Yeah.
Especially considering what Mike Smith did last season, where he had like a career year at the age of 39 or 40, whatever he is now. So this is a team that I think has a lot of holes, Lepore. And yeah, I don't trust them against a team that knows how to play a tight defensive structure, that knows how to grind in the playoffs. If Edmonton gets matched up with one of those teams, like imagine they get matched up with Calgary in the first round. I have more faith in Calgary just based on the way that they play and knowing that they are going to play that playoff style hockey under Daryl Sutter and just being one of the best defensive teams in the league. I think that's a team that could give Edmonton a ton of problems. The same with Vegas.
They have a goal and they have a goalie too, Bruno.
Exactly. Markstrom has been unreal this year for Calgary. Even Vegas. I think Vegas would give Edmonton a lot of problems. I guess maybe their best first round matchup, if it gets to this, would be Anaheim. Like if I'm an Oilers fan, I'd be like, give me Anaheim in the first round. If they finish 2-3 in the Pacific Division and Calgary or Vegas win the division, I think that would be ideal for the Oilers. But yeah, man, I do not have a lot of faith in that team.
Yeah, it's like to what I said before, like you mentioned how their power play was operating at 50%. So for it to drop, sounds funny, for it to drop all the way down to 30%, you have to look at the number. So what was their power play percentage during that time of the drop? It was terrible. It must have been like close to 0, like for them to drop at that rate. And that's what I'm referring to when I talk about the playoffs. A power play can go bananas for around maybe 2, but over 4, like you're not going to have a 30 to 50% power play in the playoffs over 4 rounds. And specifically to those guys, I think they can do a lot of damage. I think they have the ability to turn a game on its head and a series on its head, but I just don't think the rest of the team is good enough for them to go all the way. I'll say it like I really don't. Like you mentioned those teams, even in their division, I'd consider Calgary and Vegas favorites over Edmonton. I really would.
Yeah, no, 100%. I just think they're more well-rounded teams. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to me. And even, I'll even look at some of the defensive numbers right now, just in terms of, goals against per game. Calgary, number 2 in the league right now.
Okay.
2.21 goals against per game. Vegas, they got off to a rough start. They're obviously climbing up the standings right now, but that's another team. I just think defensively, I have more faith in them than the Oilers, right? And that's the thing that I always look at. You could have all the firepower in the world, especially, and I think it's because we've seen the Leafs go through this now multiple times. You could have all the firepower in the world, all the talent, but if you do not know how to keep the puck out of your own net come playoff time, you are going to have major issues. There aren't very many times over the last number of years where a team with just an amazing offensive group and a terrible defensive system, defense core, has gone on to win the Stanley Cup.
The big one was Pittsburgh.
It was Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They had Brian Dumoulin and Ron Hainsey as their top two defensemen and somehow won the cup.
And then somehow won. Like some guy named, Crosby, Malkin, and Kessel, and the list went on. The depth, but again, the depth that team had, going down, was incredible. And they had a goalie too at the time, like Murray. Murray played well. So
Matt Murray was actually good.
Yeah. Ooh, slide that in. Hey, Bruno, slide that in.
A little shot to the Senators. But no, and that's the thing, right? It's like, sure, can it happen? And listen, McDavid and Draisaitl, they're the same caliber essentially as Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah,
could they go on a crazy run like that? Sure, it's possible, but I wouldn't be betting on that. Like, could it happen once every 10 years like we saw with Pittsburgh? Sure, but I'm not betting on it with this Edmonton Oilers team.
Yeah, no, me neither. I mean, I don't think much more to talk about it with it. I think we've heard Oilers fans enough.